we're going through on live. This is yeah. So
Okay.
okay, there we go. So hi everyone, welcome to the live conference. This is so exciting with Professor Samms-Vaughn from Jamaica. This is so exciting. Doing this. I am just gonna share it on everywhere and share it around. And then I'm gonna send you the link, Prof.
Okay. You want to send it by email for me? Let me see if I can pick it up on my computer.
Yes. Um, I'm trying to actually send you the link. Um, share. Okay. And we have people on. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Civility Day family conference. We are live. I'm just trying to share it so that we can. I'm going to send you my Facebook page, Prof, on
Right.
WhatsApp as well. There we go. It's now on WhatsApp, and I'm going to send it to Danielle as well. There we
Okay.
go. And they can go on my page and watch it because it's public. So thank you all for joining me. Welcome to the National Family Civility Day Conference. I'm online now with Professor Samms-Vaughn from Jamaica. We are on to 4 o'clock. I'm Dr. Rebecca, and this is so exciting because we're actually talking about family civility. We're talking about how we are developing, and Professor Samms-Vaughn is, I call you the world leading expert because everybody I speak to is like, oh, you work with Professor Samms-Vaughn, you know her, and you have really been wonderful when it comes to the research you have done. I think, how you came about to doing all the research specifically for this age group. What impact does it have on a country why you took such a passion with this age group 0 to 6?
I, I, it was breaking up a little bit, but you're asking about why I focused on this age group.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. It was my research. I always wanted to find out what happens to children very young child and the importance of ensuring the development of that very young brain.
Okay. Okay. And in your research, what have you found as impactful when it comes to a country? Because we realized in your research, you realized when you develop a child, this generation 0 to 6 is a generation that you can actually improve a country. Correct?
That's correct. And we're going to talk about that a little more.
So, all right, we're going to go into your presentation. Unfortunately, I cannot share the slides. I'm still working on how to do these permissions, and I do apologize. But can we go into your presentation, talk about it? I mean, I have it here so I can ask questions. And it's teaching young children civility, which is very important because it's about what we're today.
Right.
And what I will do is share for those who want to see the PowerPoint. We can share it later on with people. So the outline is the socio-emotional development and its importance. Let's start with that.
Right.
Why is the socio-emotional development of a child so important?
Okay. So when we talk about civility, we're really talking about how children interact with other people, with their family first and with other people. And really, what that is, when we come down to how developmental persons speak about it, we're really talking about socio emotional development. But it is what people see and interpret as civility, meaning just the same thing, how you interact with others. So, if we were to look at what socio emotional development is for children, it's the way that children learn to understand first, express and manage their emotions and develop relationship with others. So if you notice, the first thing is understanding, and then they learn how to express it and manage it. There are a lot of adults who haven't learned this yet, and they indeed cause us the challenges that we have with violence and aggression in countries. So it's really critical for children to learn this.
And well, yes, and but how do we actually, and you put that on, how do we teach our children this if their parents don't know it?
Well, that's a challenge, and that's why it's so important for parents to understand what that means. Children who have good socio emotional development, they're happier, they learn better at school, they're very highly motivated to learn, they have a really positive attitude, they participate more in class, and they get on well with their peers. But children who don't have trouble following directions, they have difficulties staying focused on learning, they're sometimes rejected by their classmates, they have low self esteem, and they generally tend to learn poorly in school.
Wow. Yeah. And so, what are the types of socio-emotional development?
Well, there are different types. And, when we use these terms, we often think of them in adults, but we
Mhm.
break it down for children. So the first thing is being aware of yourself. And that is recognizing, being able to recognize your emotions and knowing what are your emotional strengths and what are your emotional limitations. And we all have strengths and we all have limitations. So there's nobody who's perfect here. So that's the first thing. Then emotional regulation is about how you manage stress when it comes. And all of us are under stress right now, right? And none of us planned for this stress. But it's about how you manage it and how you motivate yourself. The next thing is about how socially aware you are. So understanding yourself is one bit of it. Understanding other people is the other bit of it. And understanding other people's behavior, being able to interpret that behavior, and understanding too the culture in which you live, because we live in different cultures, and different cultures have different norms of behavior, and you are formed by that culture that you live in. And then there's how you get on with each other, relationships, and then there's independence, which is how you manage
Okay, we're just freezing a little, Prof. Yes, the
to
Wi-Fi
all of this
connection.
civility.
Yeah, you froze a little bit because the Wi-Fi. This is the thing when we're doing different countries.
Right,
The
right.
Wi-Fi is different in each country. So you were at I love about the fact of the social awareness that you mentioned, the cultural norms. Living in Canada, we have so many different cultures living in the same city, and that is the biggest lesson when you move to Canada that you learn is learning how to interpret the different cultural norms and behavior, even in the workplace and in school. So these kids in Canada are going to school with so many different cultures that what's really amazing about it is that they are able to learn these different cultural norms because they're going to school with so many different kids of different cultures.
And that's why it's important for us to expose children to these cultures and these norms from very very early on, because if you get an understanding of different cultures, different ethnicities, and you learn to understand just the general rules of human behavior, respect and understanding people, if you get that right from early on, then we won't have some of the challenges that we have later on.
Right, and that's amazing. Um, and then in the same thing, we unfortunately missed you when it comes to relationship skills. Can you expand on the relationship skills because you froze a little and the independence of the decision making?
Right. So relationship skills is about learning how to get on with others,
Mhm.
and to form relationships with persons, to seek out and form relationships with individuals and with groups, and being able to retain those relationships. And independence is about how to care for yourself, one, and how to make decisions that are in your best interest.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, and then so that's and then the trajectory. So let's talk about. We have a lot of people watching from all over the world. I want to thank everybody who's watching from all over the world. And the what is specific in their trajectory in your research that you've done with children in the Caribbean?
Children in the Caribbean, it's very interesting in the Caribbean. We have a kind of dichotomy because children are very loved and very valued, but on the other hand, we also tend to have very harsh forms of discipline. So we have this dichotomy that creates a challenge for children to sort it out, you know. But so those are some of the challenges that we have, and this of course leads to a generally more aggressive kind of society because that's how the children have been raised. But we are doing better. We are learning more about this, and parents, especially younger parents, are learning more about using non-violent forms of discipline. This is definitely a change that I've seen over the years.
That's amazing. And what do you feel that is contributing to that change? Because this is something we're talking about today. How do we change our culture? How do we change our way of life in order to get a better, more civility in our life? So how did you make that
Higher
change? How do
educational
you
levels because as we advance as a society, most countries, the next one generation is more educated than the other. So I think we're having first higher levels of education. We still have ways to go. I'm not saying we're there yet, but definitely there are more children getting educated up to the secondary level and more at the tertiary level. So one, we're doing that. Two, public education is a whole lot easier now with social media. So persons are not just confined to their own little world and their own country, but people are understanding what happens in other countries and that there may be and learning that there may be other forms of discipline, other ways to interact with children, different ways to stimulate children. So the global world, and we're learning this right now that we're not we can't stay isolated at all, that what happens in one country really significantly impacts others. So that has been a positive force for us.
That's amazing. And so let's go back to now what we're receiving in our life right now in the sense of you say why are children so different?
Well, I had some slides up that showed
Yeah.
children who start at preschool, and the teacher within a week, the teacher knows the different children. She knows the ones who get easily frustrated, when they're trying to build something and it doesn't go the way it is, and they throw the blocks around. She knows the ones who will, when someone can't do what they're supposed to do, who will step over to help them. The teacher knows the ones who, share easily and the ones who fight. Within a week, I promise
Yeah.
you, they know who those children are. And basically, the children are different because they've had different life experiences up until then. And those
Mm-hmm.
life experiences are what determines, how a child interacts when they get into the setting. Because preschool is commonly the first place that children have to interact with children who are different from them and with a variety of children and be with them all day. Typically before that, children are in their home settings, more limited mixing with other children. But in preschool now, it becomes a Monday to Friday, 4 to 6 hours every day. And they have to
Mm-hmm.
learn these relationship skills. And if they haven't had their brains set right, then you will see the kind of differences that a teacher sees.
Wow. Yeah. No, I understand completely. Wow. Okay. So I mean, like I said, this is phenomenal, and we're going on to the biology of the young brain.
Yeah,
And again,
and
thank you for the PowerPoint because it's helping me.
and it's important for parents to understand a little bit of biology. I always ask parents to go all the way back to their biology class with the brain and brain development because we have come to understand how important that development is.
Mhm.
When the young brain, if you look at a baby, you will see that the head is almost a quarter of the body. But if you think
Mhm.
of yourself as an adult, your head is not a quarter of your body. Your head is about an eighth of your body. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not that the brain has shrunk over time, it's that the brain grew fastest
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in those early years, and then the rest of the body had to grow to catch up with the brain. And so,
Mm-hmm.
what we're trying to do now, as we learn, is that we are trying to ensure that parents understand that it is this period of maximum brain development. This is where the basis of how a child learns is set. Not only how a child learns, but their emotions, and also, believe it or not, the type of health they're going to go into adulthood with. So, a lot is very
Mm-hmm.
dependent on this very, very early period of life. Let me just get
Mm-hmm.
to
Hold on.
when you start off with the brain, you have the brain cells, which we call neurons, and you start off with a certain number of neurons when you're born. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason you get that number that you start with is that those cells are responsible for the basic things in life, breathing, your heart beating, those kinds of things. So those brain cells have to be there. They are the basis of life. But then the brain cells grow and they specialize and they get connections. Those
Mm-hmm.
connections are called synapses. And when a baby is born, the number of connections at birth is about 50 trillion. Now, I can't even think of what a trillion is, but it's 50 of it. That's all you need to
Yeah.
know. It's 50 trillion. And
Wow.
within a few months, it becomes 1,000 trillion.
Wow.
And so you have the brain making these connections very, very rapidly. And what happens is that the type of connections that are made in the brain is dependent on the type of experience that a child has. So if a child lives in a home where they're shouted at, they're hurt, they're hit, then the brain wires one set of brain cells, one set of connections gets wired. But if a child lives in a home where there is responsiveness and love and care and support, praise, all of those things, then that child wires a whole different set of connections in the brain. And that's why you see the differences when the children get to school, because the kids who have been in environments that have wired their brains for aggression and violence are very different from the children who live in a supportive home and whose brains are wired differently. So let's use the example that I always use. A child is walking along and somebody pushes them from behind. The
Mm-hmm.
child who is wired for violence and aggression and non-responsiveness turns around and punches because they're
Right.
impulsive. They haven't learned to manage their emotions. So they hit. The child
Mm-hmm.
who has learned emotional management turns around and tries to find out what happened. So they might find out that their classmate tripped over something and accidentally bumped into them. And
Mm-hmm.
once there's that explanation and that understanding, then you don't get an interaction that's violent or aggressive. And that has to do with just how we grow children up, what we do
Mm-hmm.
in those first few years of life.
Wow. I'm actually going to switch over to the other account because I have Divya here, and we're going to continue. So just one moment. I hope it works.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
So it's working. Great. You guys can hear me.
I can hear you, certainly.
Awesome. Rebecca, you seem frozen. Mhm.
Okay, if you're comfortable, I think we should proceed until we're able to.
Yes, until she figures out. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so go ahead. What were you? I mean, I joined in, and my mind is blown on what you're saying, because these same things I'm trying to incorporate into what I'm doing. Oh, you can still hear me. Okay. And, I'm just blown away because you're already explaining this, where kids from an early age, like right at home from a baby, they learn all of these things, like they're wired, we're programming them. And from what they experience in their homes as a child, as a baby, that's what their behavior reflects later on in school, in life, and everything they do. So I'm so happy you're going into such details to explain this.
Yeah. And it's not that we can't do anything later on to help children.
Yeah.
We can.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
can. But it's a lot more expensive,
And
and it's
yeah.
a lot more difficult to do.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
getting a therapist, are you hearing me still? Right. So getting a therapist, thing is that, one, there is a worldwide shortage of persons who work with children, therapists,
Mm-hmm.
whole worldwide shortage. That's one. And two is that it's a very individual level of care, which is very expensive. So
Yes,
if we can fix something from the start, why not? Let's do that, so that we
exactly.
don't have so we don't wait on problems to develop, and two, we don't have to try to fix things.
Exactly, because prevention is better than cure.
Right. So
Yes,
I'm going to talk about some of the things that parents can do now that we've talked about how important that is. And,
yes,
and I'm going to start with something that's absolutely critical, and that's the first thing I put there: self-care. Parents have got to look after themselves. If you are not well, you can't help your child.
yes,
So self-care is absolutely important. You've got to be physically and mentally healthy. We know that children who live in homes where parents are depressed, first we used to just talk about mothers being depressed, but now more and more research is being on fathers who are depressed. Sorry, Rebecca is just talking to me, so
oh,
just ask
okay,
her what she needs me to do. Yeah, so more and more talk is about fathers being depressed. So it's important that parents know when they're stressed, get help if they're stressed, and also do preventive things of making sure they have time in the day to relax. Parents have got to be well.
yes,
And the second thing that parents can do is ensure that they have a calm home environment. A chaotic environment creates a chaotic child.
yes,
Anybody who's had kids who have had a very organized teacher and a teacher who is not organized is can, can tell that difference right away. You walk into the classroom, you see the difference. And the
yes.
same thing happens in our homes, right? So the home that is chaotic. Rebecca's asked me to tell everyone to hold on. Let me see. I just hope I'm not talking to you alone. I just want to make sure that
No, no, I
everyone,
can hear you.
right. Okay, Rebecca's asked me to stop and ask everyone to hold on for a minute.
Okay.